professional therapist. So it's a big opportunity. You should really listen to every word carefully. You should try to take the information in and try to use this opportunity. I wanted to share just one thought. The Rosh Hashiva used to tell us that one of the most important things in raising Talmidim and raising children is giving them the proper respect, the proper kavod, making them feel important, making them feel chashuv. I asked my son if there's something that I would have to do to improve me being a father and the relationship, me and you, what would I do? What would I need to do? He said, no, you're a very busy man. You take care of the community, you take care of other people. Sometimes a child could feel that he is secondary, he's not so important. He said, I would say the best thing that I would use in my life from my father is to make me feel that I'm very, very important to him. He said that right on the spot without even thinking. That's something that I think it's the nature, the innate nature of a human being. He needs to feel chashuv, he needs to feel important. If he does not feel important, then it's very difficult for him to function. Now God, before he created the world, it says in the Midrash that God believed in the world that he created. God didn't just create a world, he created a world that he believed in. So Rav Tam says, the material that you work with, you have to believe in him. You have to make him feel that you believe he has the potential to become a great being, great human being, great child, a great person. So the number two thing is, besides kavod, you have to show him that you believe in him, that he is important to you, and that he has the abilities to become something very special, and is very special. And number three, I believe, is simcha. I don't know if I'm taking any of his points, but just the thought that I thought a little bit. If a person there's no happiness in the home, when you do mitzvahs in the house, when you say brachos in the house, if there's no happiness, if there's no joy in the house, it doesn't matter what you tell the child, it doesn't matter what you teach the child, nothing will go into the bones of this child. The only time that something goes into the bones of the child and becomes part of him, when he sees that you're happy. He sees my father, my mother are happy, being B'nai Torah, being Avdei Hashem, with simcha. That's the only thing that will take any message that you give to the child to make it go inside. So with these three thoughts that I think you should keep in mind, without further ado, let's hear what the rabbi has to say. I'm going to leave the recorder on. If you don't mind, you have the recorder. You leave the recorder on. People ask me to record it.
Rabbi, can you announce on Zoom for people to mute themselves so other people could hear?
Sure. If you're on Zoom, if you could please mute yourself so that we don't have any unintentional sound coming in. A number of years back, there was a young man in his 20s who was charged with the very unfortunate task of eulogizing his young father, in maspid his father, who passed away suddenly in his 40s. And this young man, he was in his young 20s at the time, he said over the following story at the Levaya. I heard this from an eyewitness. Someone standing at the Levaya said this over. And this is what he recounted. This man standing and being maspid his father that he had just lost. He said over that a little while back, he was learning in Eretz Yisrael. They lived in New York. He was in Eretz Yisrael learning. And he was speaking with his father on the phone. And in passing, he mentioned that he's going through a hard time. He didn't say exactly what it was. He was going through a hard time. Most of us go through hard times. He was going through a slump, they say in baseball, right? Wasn't something that anything practical couldn't be done about it, but that's what you do. You tell your father when you're going through a hard time. And the phone call ended. What he thought was the end of the story. 24 hours later, there was a knock on his door at his yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. The son's having a hard time, so I'm going to go be with him right now. Father came, gave him a hug. Daddy, Tati, what are you doing here? I said, you're having a hard time. I came to take you out. I'm going to go back in a few hours. We're going to go out to eat. There was nothing practical. There were no solutions. That's a father. Son's having a hard time. You fly 20 hours back, drop everything to be with your son. To this man, he lost his father physically, but he didn't lose his father. His father, the warmth, the love, the feeling of being with him is and what will remain with him forever. And everything he does, to have that picture of his father and that holding his hand, if you will, that'll get him through every bump in life. I remember there was Yeshiva Zatzal, Rav Henoch Leibowitz. This is about, when I was in Yeshiva, about 50, 60 years after his father had passed. Rav David Leibowitz was the founder of Yeshivas Chavetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Cohen. Dozens and dozens of yeshivas and institutions, including the building that we are all sitting in right now, were all due to his founding. Rosh Yeshiva also lost his father at a very, very young age. And the whole yeshiva was thrust upon him at the age of 24. I remember the Rosh Yeshiva 60 years later just saying with such emotion, I knew how much he loved me. I knew how much he loved me. It was not easy at all. There were plenty of naysayers saying there's no way that the Rosh Yeshiva would be able to, a single man at 24 years old, be able to carry it. And I would dare say that a large component of the firepower that kept the Rosh Yeshiva and the yeshiva alive through years where there was basically no Talmidim. I think I heard there were 19 years where there was basically no Talmidim in the yeshiva. But it was that feeling, my father would want me to do it. And the love, and I dare say maybe even more than all the godless in Torah, was that connection. The relationship that the Rosh Yeshiva had and felt decades and decades. And he said it as if his father was holding his hand right then. So, we may not have the wherewithal to jump on a plane to see our child when they're going through a hard time, and we may not have a whole yeshiva Chavetz Chaim on our shoulders, but for our children, we certainly can give them some extra time when they're having a hard time, showing them that we're there, taking them out to eat, whatever it is. The point is that the relationship is there. The warmth, the love, the iman, anochi b'tzara, I'm with you. If you're having a hard time, I'm with you, and you're not alone. I'd like to give a tremendous thank you to Rabbi Amanoff and other Rosh Yeshiva that granted us and opened up their chashuv Makom Torah for this event. We're very appreciative. And may all of them have much nachas from their Talmidim and families. This lecture is being sponsored Le'ilui Nishmas, my dear father, Rav Chaim Herzl ben Shepsel, and my dear in-laws, Rav Gabriel ben Eliezer and Leah Devorah and Rav Naftali Hertz. We owe everything to them. May their neshamas have an aliyah. B'rishus the Rosh Yeshiva, esteemed colleagues, friends, and Kol Kahal HaKadosh Hazeh. If there's one thing that you take away tonight, I hope it is this. The idea of parents meeting the emotional needs of children is not just a nice thing and a good thing, which of course it is, I would propose that it is absolutely imperative. It is absolutely a ma'akev. And if a child's emotional needs are not being met by their parents, you're basically building a house without a foundation. I wouldn't want to take the elevator to the top. Now, in case you think that, well, it's the therapist, he's so open-minded that his brains fell out. Of course, the self-esteem fad. Who says that really our Gedolim really believed and taught how important this whole idea of self-esteem, emotional health, and parents' role in that? So I'd like to just read you a few quotes from Gedolim. I'm actually going to read the quote without saying who it is, and maybe we can have a little guessing who would write such a thing. I agree with the educator who said that a child constructs his picture of the world through the experience he has with his mother. Now, fathers are still included. This book was talking to mothers, but I think it's both. According to whether the mother is loving or unloving, the child will feel that the world is loving or unloving. When he is not loved, he fails to learn to love. Such children grow up finding it extremely difficult to understand the meaning of love. Show me the juvenile delinquent, and in almost every case, I will show you a person resorting to desperate means to attract the emotional warmth and attention he failed to get, but so much wants and needs. Aggressive behavior, when fully understood is in fact nothing but love frustrated. It is a technique for compelling love, as well as a means for taking revenge on a society that has let the person down, leaving him disillusioned, deserted, and dehumanized. The best way to approach aggressive behavior in children is not by aggressive behavior toward them, but with love. If you find rebels in society today, it is because they were never given proper love. Anyone want to take a stab at who may have been the author to that? Sigmund Freud? Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. Not bad. Not so liberal. Reb Shlomo Volvi, who was a very chashuv mashgiach that I know my Rosh Hashiva held of very much, said the following: the first step is to have happy children. Again, the first step is to have happy children. If the child is satisfied and happy, then you can be successful in their education. So, if we have a child that's not happy, that means we're missing step one. We're missing the foundation. And why are we continuing to build with the education? Right? If you ever walk past the construction site and you see them building a beautiful building, and the engineers come and say, wait, we forgot to put the foundation down. What are you going to say? We started already. Let's finish the job. Not going to have much of a building. So I think we need to see from these Gedolim how they approached what it means to build a child, what it means to build an emotionally healthy child, and only after building someone who feels good about themselves, feels with self-worth, self-love, self-acceptance, can they do mitzvahs on that foundation. In the words of another Minsker Rebbe, I heard from I think Rabbi Adler's his name on a tape, he said, first make them whole, then make them frum. If we're trying to make frum kids, on a precarious foundation of children without good self-esteem feeling good about themselves, I'm afraid we're wasting our time. Now, very often you hear classes on techniques. You know, what's the best way to control the child in this situation? How do I get the child to do this? And how do I get the child to do that? So I think that often the first step is being missed, and that is, what are you seeing in a child, right? So if I have someone who's rebellious and trying to overthrow authority, which, you know, I hear in therapy, some parents say some very, shall we say, interesting, they attribute some very interesting, you know, all types of very, you know, scary motivations to the actions. Well, then maybe, indeed, then a harsh response is correct. However, I don't think that's usually what's going on with a child. Usually, troubled behavior is indicative of something going on underneath. And it behooves us to see why they're doing this before we respond. There was a researcher by the name of Strasberg. He did a very interesting study. He took two sets of parents. He took Group A, mothers that had a relatively good relationship with their kids, and Group B, mothers who had not such a great relationship, a lot of conflict. And this was the whole study. He showed them a 30-second clip. And all he said is, just tell me what you see. This was the clip. And he put them in separate rooms, and he said, Group A, here's the clip. And the video shows Johnny playing with his toys. Mom comes and says, Johnny, come on, it's time to go to sleep. He says, no, come on, Ma, I need more time. A couple more times, Johnny, you gotta go to sleep. Ma, come on, I really need more time. One more time. That's the end of the clip. He says to the parents, to the mothers that have good relationships with their kids, what did you see in the video? They said, normal, typical nighttime. The kid doesn't want to go to sleep. He has to be cajoled to get into bed. No biggie. He took the same clip and he showed it to the next group, Group B, who had conflicting relationships with them, and the children, and they said, this is a kid that needs to be disciplined. He's trying to rebel, and there's no discipline. If he does not put in his place, there's going to be big trouble. So you see, it's not usually about what we do. It's much more about what we see. If we see innocent, age-appropriate behavior of kids doing what kids do, then our response will be, I think, a lot more favorable. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz has a fascinating shmooze. He has a kasha that by the Meraglim, why was it that they were punished for all 40 days that they went out into Eretz Yisrael and came back with a bad report? The actual last day that they came back and said it was the only time, was the only day that they should be punished for. The first 39 days they were sent. They were sent to Eretz Yisrael to go see the land. So why were we punished for 40 years? Because of the 40 days. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says that it was really the whole 40 days that was the issue, because what was the ayin? There was supposed to be an ayin tova. If you saw the big fruit in a good way, then you would report, Baruch Hashem, it's amazing fruit. If you saw everything in the right ayin, there wouldn't have been any lashon hara. So I think oftentimes it's about, what do you see? Like, what exactly, if it's an age-appropriate behavior, why are we so upset at the child? And if it's not an age-appropriate behavior, then usually there's something wrong. So it behooves us to understand it. Now, there's a cop-out that I often hear parents say, or they quickly try to wash their hands of faulty parenting. And they say, which parent is perfect? Right? Come on, whose parent is perfect? So I'm here to tell you that the grievances that children have, and a lot of them have very valid grievances, is not because the parents were not perfect. And you're right. That perfection is reserved for Hashem. So that's not their problem. Their problem is the following, and I would like to see them wash their hands of this statement. These children feel, and I think they're often correct, that their basic kavod adam was violated chronically for years. I'll say that one more time. And I wanted the cop-outs to wash their hands of this one. Their basic kavod ha'adam was violated chronically for years. That's a very serious grievance. So, I think it's important for us to be honest as parents, myself included. Are we treating our children with the proper kavod adam, as Rabbi Aminoff said? So unfortunately, people wonder, they say, how could this big rabbi, he's so nice to everyone out there. There's no way, and his kids have such kindness. The kids must be Meshuggah. There's no way that this same rabbi, that obviously the kid's not, impossible. I think if we're honest, I think we will all have to admit that our public persona, which is under threat, reputation, embarrassment, and everything else, very often in no way resembles when the kapata comes off at home. And therefore, I think we all have to be very careful. Sometimes I try to tell a parent, just treat the kid as well as you treat a stranger. That's all I'm asking of you. We sometimes feel this ownership that this is my child and I have a right to do as I please. Rav Shlomo Volbe says the following: we frequently find parents who claim to be taking quote-unquote educational steps toward their children when, in fact, there is no connection between their actions and chinuch. The actual underlying motivation for these actions is totally egotistical. Parents will allow themselves to act toward their children with bad midos, which they would never dream of exhibiting toward other adults. They will act toward their children with kina, sina, kavod, kas, gaiva. Anybody need translation? And mainly with the need and desire for an unhealthy need for control. As if this is a normal way to behave. There is a feeling that this child was put in my control. And I have a right to totally control him. He is my object. And his purpose in life is to serve my needs. Says the Sefer HaBris, Reb Pinchas Eliyahu of Vilna. And I quote, there are people who are careful not to hurt anyone's feelings. In fact, they treat everyone with love, yet they hurt their own children's feelings. They say that this behavior isn't sinful since Hashem put them in my hands and He compelled them to accept my discipline. As it says, honor your father. And my intention is to discipline them in the ways of the Torah. But in truth, their words are neither logical nor according to the Torah. For why should their children not be included in the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself? The truth is that one is punished more severely for hurting a relative. And therefore, one who unjustly causes pain to his child will be punished more harshly. Now, I want to address a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I want to be mechalik between love and accept and respect. Just have to bend down. Thank you. Oh, that high. Close it off. Oh. That's Joe? So I have a little bit, well, maybe a little bit more than a little bit of a pet peeve. Most parents are very quick to say, but I love them. They know I love them, and I love. I like to take out the word love for a little while. See, love is fickle. Love is very hard to define and very easy to hide behind. Animals also love their children. Sometimes they eat them, but they love them. So, what I propose to you tonight is cross out the word love, just for like, I don't know, a week or two. And instead of saying, do I love my child, say, do I accept my child for who he or she is? Do I respect, that's right. I know it might be a little bit foreign. I remember having this discussion with this lady. She said, no, I don't have to respect my children. Why does this have to respect my children? Okay? So I think if we can take out the word love a little bit, it's very, very easy. Kissy, you know? They love like they never criticize, and they criticize like they never love. Right? So criticism, even done in the name of love, remains criticism. And chronic criticism, I give this to you in writing, chronic criticism, this is for your spouse too, will destroy the relationship. Say it one more time. Chronic criticism will destroy the relationship with your child and his or her self-esteem. There's something else I heard from Rav Shaya Cohen recently by a convention. This is also a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. There are some parents and I think mechanchim who believe that no matter what, a parent and a mechanech does not apologize to a child. And Rav Shaya Cohen, so you don't have to rely on me for this one, not a fan, put it lightly. And I think if someone has that opinion or even has that possibility in their mind that who says I have to apologize if I hurt a child, I think, may need a little bit of rearrangement of the furniture upstairs. But what does that mean? If it's a relationship and you hurt someone, how do you not apologize? And furthermore, there are parents, and I see this in therapy, who use kabedes avicha v'asimecha, they distort it, and they use it to terrorize their children. So in their mind, they could say whatever they want to a child, and a child is not allowed to talk back. Now, you can ask your own Orthodox Rav, but from the little bit I know in halacha, that is not kabedes avicha v'asimecha. Does not say that a child shall be a doormat. I never saw that. So if parents insult a child, I actually encourage them in therapy to stand up for themselves in a respectful way. Look, if you curse at them, you scream at them, yeah, 100%. That's not proper kabedes avicha v'asimecha. But if I tell patients, if a parent criticizes you and insults you, and you say to them, when you said that, I felt hurt, and they say that's chutzpah, don't accept it. That is not chutzpah. That's a distortion of kabedes avicha v'asimecha. Now, one of the troubles is that it's a bit of a silent killer sometimes. So sometimes you have a child that's very obedient and quote unquote the perfect child. And all of a sudden, or at least what meets the eye, all of a sudden, the child starts acting out. Either frumkeit issues, emotional disorders, and the parents come and they say, I don't understand. We don't know what happened. This was the perfect child. So I get very nervous when I see perfect children, actually. I'm not even saying that tongue in cheek. When I see kids that are just so obedient, I'm wondering, well, what's wrong with the kid? Why are you listening so much? I don't know. I mean, that's so normal. That's not normal behavior. So, the problem is it works well enough, the fear instilled in the children and the heavy consequences, it works well enough to fool people into thinking that it's a good idea. But then when all Gehenna breaks loose a few years later, they don't know what's going on. So I'll tell you that the seeds were always sown years before, unbeknownst to the untrained eye. I just want to read to you what Rabbi Scheinberg, same liberal gadol that we just mentioned, says about instilling fear in a house. Assuming I can find it. That's such a safe assumption. Maybe a nigget in the middle. Is important. I'm not willing to forgo this. My wife put it together. It's not my fault. Sorry. I have a rule. If you apologize, that's okay.
When's marriage ring?
All right, another few seconds. Oh! That's, I think, in some maybe in my honor, my safety, I found it. Okay, so, says Rav Scheinberg about pachad, about fear, that what does it do? It says pachad hu churban. It's a pretty strong lashon. Pachad hu churban b'chayim mishpacha. If someone instills fear in the house, it is a destruction. And specifically with children, they're looking for the warmth and that pleasant relationship with their parents. Our children need patience and love. It says psychological. You can see how it's spelled in Hebrew here if you want afterwards. And at times, this churban, this psychological destruction will remain with them for the rest of their life. So I think we need to be very careful, especially when our children are young and things look very, very good. The kid's doing everything he's supposed to. If the kid's doing everything he's supposed to, I think you got a big problem. So I wouldn't wait until you, chas v'shalom, have a bigger problem later. Has anybody here ever eaten at a restaurant where the food was scrumptious, delicious, but there was just a few problems? The place had a terrible smell. The waiter was pushy. The music was loud. The tables weren't bussed. And all the tables were squashed together. Not to mention a few crawly things in between the courses. Anybody going back there? I don't think so. But the food was great. You can have great food. You can have a great product. You can have a great service. If there's not a good ambiance, if there's not a good pleasantness, or not interested in doing business with you. So certainly we, who have the most authentic, best product in the world called the Torah and everything it has to offer, I think it behooves us to be very careful. We have a really scrumptious product, not to ruin it, right? So how often, in the name of getting a child to do, quote unquote, the right thing, now we may spoil his or her long-term appetite for that item. Exactly like the restaurant. It could be the best steak in the world, but I associate it with rats, excuse me. I associate it with, I'm not going back to that restaurant. So I think we need to be very careful, and the key words are long-term chinuch in mind. Questions. Where will they be in 5 years, 8 years, 10 years? Is it such a big deal that's worth making a war over right now? In the early 1900s, it was very, very difficult to be Shomer Shabbos. Everybody knows that you had to go basically from week to week, getting fired, pink slips, because no one, they knew you were keeping Shabbos, they wouldn't hire you back. And unfortunately, most people were not able to be, they couldn't withstand the Nisayim. There were some Giborim, amazing giants of character, who were able to withstand. There was actually one guy who decorated his whole sukkah with his pink slips. This was his pink badge of courage. Somebody asked Moshe Feinstein a fascinating question. They said, how is it possible that we know that being a role model is the greatest form of chinuch? So the children of these Gedolim, Giborim, had a stellar picture of Shomer Shabbos with such Mesiras Nefesh. And they asked Moshe, said, how is it possible that by and large these kids went off the derech? Sal Kasha. For Moshe could have very easily done what we do today. You point outward the influence. These kids, they maybe didn't have internet, but they all went to public school. So what's such a big kasha? The outside influence. They hardly saw anyone with Shmir Shabbos except in the house. It's not where Moshe answered, where Moshe pointed inward. And he said, just as Rabbi Amanoff was saying about the simcha in the home, and again, this is not a taina on these Giborim who were able to keep Shabbos under the most trying conditions, but the bottom line is the way they came home, and it wasn't just one word, it was the attitude. They would come home Shabbos morning and say, Shvertz Zayin Yid. It's so difficult to be a Jew. Look at this. We did it, but it's hard. And the kids said to themselves, well, it's so difficult. What do I need it for? Right? So every salesman would tell you that a product or a service that's being marketed or up for sale has to be associated with joy, with happiness. I think we need to be very careful not to chas v'shalom taint that beautiful product of the Torah with feelings of the child feeling coerced to do something they don't want to do, or just in general pressure for things that they're not up to in their stage of life. How much more time do we have? It's somewhere, I'll just say it by heart. There was a 10-year-old that that wasn't interested in davening so much, and his father came to Rav Wolbe and he said, well, how do I get him to daven? He said, well, if you fight with him, he's certainly not going to want to daven when he's older. If you leave him, there's a good chance he'll come to it on his own. So too, story with Rav Hutner, he witnessed a father who kept redirecting his child to look inside, right? Very familiar. Sounds almost right. Kept redirecting his child to look inside. You got to daven. So Rav Hutner came over and he said, what are you doing? He said, I'm teaching my child to daven. He said, no, you're not. You want to teach your child to daven, then daven. Right? So that's like a classical case of, we could get that possible, if you consider it, a short-term gain of the child having his head, in line with the sitter for that hour. But what is it doing to the child's feeling for davening? Right? It's like the guy eating the food in the disgusting restaurant. The food's delicious, but he's not coming back. We want our kids to come back to our restaurants. We want our kids to have deep inside of them a love for what they're doing. Okay, so I want to speak a couple of minutes because I have a couple of stories that if they wouldn't be so frightening, they would actually be humorous. They're probably humorous even though they are frightening. There's a therapist that I know. He was looking for a place years ago for his practice. He was looking for an apartment, a basement or something like that, and there was a lady put up a sign for sale, called her up, she said, yeah, I have it for sale, I have a guy living in there, he's a chaya, he lives like a chaya, he is a chaya, everything's all over the place, I want him out, and we want to have a normal person living there. So you want to see it? He says, all right, I'll see it. So he comes to see it, and the guy's there. And right in front of the guy, she was in Yiddish. She said, no, we're sure going to look how he lives like this, and look at this. He lives this around, he lives that around. He has a turkey from last Thanksgiving he had bitten in the fridge. And look at this, and look at that, and look at that. And the guy, you didn't have to be a therapist to see that the guy is starting to bubble up. Smoke from his ears, and then and she was oblivious. She kept saying, look at this, look at that. And finally this guy was emotionally disturbed, so whatever a typical person, he was like quadruple. So finally after she really cursed, she really said, you chaya, he said, he started cursing out and screaming and screaming. She looked at the therapist and she said, no, Chavshan Gizot, there's a Meshugana. You see? I told you, he's a Meshugana. Right? So, I think we often don't see our role in the development of other people's reactions. I'll tell you a story that happened to me recently. I was talking to a patient. He had a child that I think 16 years old, something like that. And he was telling me the terrible conflict and how his criticism. And it was very clear to me that, what a lot of the makoros of the issues were. But, I like to see what the person has to say. So after he spent a good deal of time explaining how disappointed he is, how the criticism and how terrible the relationship is. So I said to him, I thought this one would be an easy one, I'll pitch it down the middle. So what do you think some of the contributing factors are to this kid's problem? Kid you not, with all seriousness, he said, yeah, he took a certain type of an acne pill. And there could be some side effects for mood problems. Wow. Now, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know how acne pills work, but I'm quite certain that if there's anything contributing, it's batal b'shishim compared to everything else going on in the house. Okay, just a few more minutes, if you'll bear with me. Get this microphones. You guys need a break or what? What's that? Not questions yet. What, it's over? Finished? I paid for the extra Zoom, but it's past 45 minutes. Rav Volbe says in his sefer, in his amazing sefer, Zriu Binyan B'Chinuch, I highly, he doesn't need my askama, but really worth reading and rereading, planting and building. But he says that, parents often have unreasonable and unrealistic expectations of children. He says, for example, to have a young child sit at the table, a Shabbos table, for a long period of time is unreasonable, right? Now, I think often we have unreasonable expectations of our children. For example, I think it's pretty common for parents who want to take a nap, for example, on Shabbos. So they'll leave 3 kids under the age of 13 in the house and expect them not to kill each other, as if that's a normal expectation. Right? 3 boys. These kids, that's what they do for a living, is kill each other. Right? So they go to sleep. Now, I'm not saying don't do it, but when they kill each other, you should give yourself a little patch. Okay, I made a mistake. Right? So I think that very often we don't see our role in the equation. And I think if we do some more preventive parenting, for example, it's probably not such a great idea when the kids come off the bus to be on the phone and then wonder why the kid, doesn't want to talk to us. Right? So I think all of us to a degree, do this sometimes, and it's just, I think, a little bit of forethought and saying, hey, you know what, I think that doesn't make sense, that my kids should be able to, sit in the back seat of a car, squashed azoi, for a 4-hour trip and not have any trouble. So if you're going to take the trip from the beginning, I'm not saying don't take the trip, but it is normal and it will happen that they will fight. So normally a real good parent says, next time I'll leave you home like dogs, and I won't take you on any Chalamite trips. Is that really realistic? You took 4 kids who already have kin and hate each other from the last 10 fights that day. They're sitting in a hot car because your air conditioner doesn't work in the back. And, you're expecting a smooth ride. It's just unrealistic. So you think if we're prepared, that's what happens. Kids fight. And try to minimize it, but when it does happen, instead of looking at them like they're Al Capone, like what's wrong with you? Like how often do we hear that? And I'm not saying I don't do it, leave me out of this now, thank God I'm talking. Right? So we put the kid in a situation, you get him hot and angry, and then they say, what's wrong with you? So the kid walks around thinking there's something wrong with him. It's not a joke. So I see them a few years later when the anxiety and depression comes out. So I think it behooves us, when we have them before, to be a little bit more, cognizant of what our role is. I remember Dr. Goldman, a psychologist that I very much respect and learned a lot from. He used to always say that Mrs. Harris, I don't know if she still does it, runs an excellent, as a kindergarten or pre-1A, right? The kids come, there's a structure, it's fun, and they're busy, right? Now, obviously, we can't run that type of a kindergarten all the time, but that's the point, that's the goal. Keep it busy, keep it fun. I'm going to go do my thing. You guys are going to sit there for a few hours, and the minute you bang on the door, you call them every name under the sun. So it doesn't really make sense. Okay, so we'll end on a positive note. I hope I didn't say anything that was critical at all. It's against my nature to criticize about a criticizing speech. So we'll end on a positive note, and then we'll do some questions. I'm giving you a little bit of advance notice. You guys get your questions ready. No tomatoes. Reverend Zalman, you give us a good question? Okay, so I do have a piece of good news, though. I do have a piece of good news. And this is in all seriousness. No matter how bad, and I see this with the most difficult relationships, no matter how bad, how far the relationship has gone, and I'm talking about, I see kids, not from it all, cursing out their parent, everything. No matter how far it's gone, if a parent really is genuine, comes to the table, apologizes for what they've done, and it starts being a parent that's reasonable, very quickly things turn around. Very, very quickly. Hashem put into children a very, very strong need to want the approval and the relationship with a parent. So no matter where anybody or any child has gone, if you come to the table and be reasonable, they want to come back. I'm going to end with one last story and then do some questions and answers. This is about, again, it's not exactly what we're dealt, but how we deal with it. So, one of the best ways to research nature nurture is they take twins that were separated at birth and they analyze, because they have pretty much the same nature, the same genetics, but different nurture, and so they have that baseline of the nature and see the different nurtures. So there was a set of twins that were split up, and the researchers went to one of the twins' house, and they interviewed the parents. They said, how is Nancy doing? They said, very difficult. Good, very difficult. What's the problem? She's a very, very finicky eater. She has to have cinnamon on everything. Cinnamon, and that leads to other fights. We send her to her room. It's a disaster. I said, really? Okay. Now they went to Molly's house, a few miles down. They never met, but they say to Molly's parents, how are things? They said, good, very good. I said, no, what do you mean? How about meal times? I said, meal times are the best. All we have to do is sprinkle a little cinnamon and she'll eat anything. Thank you very much. Yes?
How could you show if a child, how can you not show disappointment if the child is not doing things that you really expect them to do? I'm going to show I'm not disappointed you're doing something I want you to be doing, and you're not doing it.
Okay, I like the question. You guys,
How can I show I'm not disappointed?
I think that's a solid question. You guys hear that question? You want to tell me, don't criticize. All right, that's about the most I could do. But you're telling me no. You want me really not to be disappointed. I see the kid didn't wake up for shul. Don't be disappointed. The kid beat up his brother. Don't be disappointed. But by the way, first of all, I just want to make a chiluk. Being disappointed in a particular act is fine. That's normal and healthy. In every relationship, sometimes people do something. Okay, we're talking about chronic disappointment where the whole child's mahus is a walking disappointment. So the question is, this kid, I had expectations he would learn in yeshiva. Now he put on jeans. He left our way of life. He listens to Goyish music. He has a girlfriend. And you tell me not to be disappointed. I think you stumped me. So I think like this. So I think like this. First of all, there's a mitzvah called Havidanas Kol Adam L'Kavskos, correct? Now, first of all, if it wasn't your child, if it was your neighbor's child, you would be very, very nice to him. You would say, oh, why don't you come over for some chalent? You could take my son's spot. We'll throw him out, right? If it's someone else's child, we have our view is much more, oh, okay, you know what? He probably had a hard time, right? It's a very interesting thing, right? So why is it that when it comes to our child, no. We know how do you know where he should be holding? Who made you the owner of expectation? If we really believe that Hashem gave us neshamas that are pikadon, it's just like your third cousin came in from Arizona and is living with you. No he'll be what I Rosh Hashiva that I wasn't, never was, not you, Zama. Right? And he'll be this that I never was, he'll be, right? So I think that if you take out your own, your whole ownership in, I think you'll see a whole different child, just like the other kid on the block. But the truth is also there's a little bit of a red herring here, because usually, like we said, the seeds were sown way before. Now you have parents saying, "Oh, I'm not asking he should be a grace Talmid Chacham. I'm not asking he should learn all day. Just put on tefillin." So you say nicely to them, "Yeah, that's not what you're saying now. But years back you did say that, right? Years back you said you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and the yarmulke is a little too small. It was World War III. So now you got to go back to the beginning." Anything else? Anyone else? Yes.
It's not a question, it's something that I want to recommend.
Yes.
I believe 100% of people here, they take care of the children and they in the right way. But some children, when they go to bed at night, they don't say Shema Yisrael. The parents say, I was Shacharit, Muharabit, they say, they don't pay attention. I think that it's very important to remind, doesn't matter the age, since the child can speak, I'm sorry, my English is not so good.
No, it's fine.
And especially the teenagers, as you say, their mind is someplace else. They are religious. They are very good families. But you just sometimes.
So you're talking about kids. You're talking about kids that know they're supposed to say Kriya Shema, or they don't know.
No, I believe everybody knows my story.
So you say-
I believe because everybody here.
They know, but they don't do it. So why don't they do it?
Forget to say
Oh, they just forget.
Just remind every child in
So-
Israel to say Shema Yisrael before go to bed. I believe maybe 99% say it, but even if
Right,
1%
so-
knows it,
I think if that is the case, that they just forget, that's a good idea. But the problem is, a lot of times, it's if you incessantly bother them every day, it could affect the taste.
It's not bothering. It just something.
Doesn't bother.
It has to be a routine. It's something that the child can put his head on the pillow before he says smash.
That sounds a little strong, no? What if he wants to put his head on the pillow before the Shema?
What do you think?
He doesn't
So
tired.
what you're saying? It's a bothering.
Maybe, yeah.
It's so difficult to say smash prayer.
I know it's difficult. He's not in the mood.
Therefore, you think it's a child if you tell him to say Shema Yisrael. Because I believe that Shema Yisrael will help any teenager to think.
If they're interested, but they're not always interested.
Go to
No, I think Shema Yisrael should be said, but if they're interested, don't bother them if they're not so interested. That's the thing. Because again, if it's a bother now, see, I think when we get very hyper-focused on the tonight's Shema, but where are they going to be in a year and 2 and 3 years when they had somebody bothering them all the time to say it? That's the question.
My question is to you.
What's the question?
Child get used to it, and this is his routine. To say
But he's already a teenager. Why isn't he in the routine yet?
bothering him?
Someone's been telling him for years. Why didn't it work till now?
What is it?
This kid, who's a teenager,
Okay.
this person has been telling him to say Kriya Shema till now,
You
no?
don't have to tell him every night. If you bring the child to believe, the child gives him a good feeling. And he,
If it gives him a good feeling, they want to do it, it's good.
and he has to get routine to it. Just you pay attention to it. It's not something that you force him to do. You suggest him to do it for his own pleasure. He has to enjoy
If he
it.
has pleasure, he should do it.
Okay, that's the point.
I like it.
And I believe if every parent will just recommend no pressure, no, you don't must, but little by little, every teenager will feel that it makes him good feeling.
Shekov, okay? Shekov.
Yeah, because you know what? Somebody told me the story that they had a lecture in Israel that some parents that Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was telling once that he was dreaming that he asked the Melech Mashiach, why you don't come? We wait for you. He said, when all the children of Israel will say Shema Yisrael, then I
All right? That's your call. Okay, I just want to end with one last thing. My good friend, is he still here? Yehuda Meir Aaron. Yeah, so if you know, people, my wife said I have to have at least one practical takeaway. So instead of techniques, because I'm not so into techniques, it's more about, again, what you're seeing and the relationship. Oh, I forgot to say that. You said that. I'll leave it. It's late. Okay. Right here, we made some copies. I think is a very good practical thing for every parent who's interested. You know, we always have all the charts for the kids, and the teeth, and the this, and they're all checked out, and the doctor checked out. We have something for the parents. Hug my kid for no reason. Monday. Help my kid clean their room.
If the kids don't do it, anything, they
That's
have to
godly.
do besides
Took a calming breath. Whoa, look at this one. Are you busy here? Took a calming breath before talking. Played a board game with my kid and had fun. Who apologized when I got upset. No, that's too much. All right, well, next time. Showed grace to my kid when they got upset. Did something silly just to make my kid laugh. Did something just for me because when I am not calm, neither is my kid. And I'll just end off. The worst time to do chinuch is b'shas ma'isa.
What is chinuch?
Chinuch is education, discipline. The worst time, but what is pretty much the only time most people do it, 99%, is the worst time. When the child is misbehaving, child and parent are not in control. And I would like to meet a parent who could get up and honestly say, when the kids are killing each other, when they're doing this, I'm perfectly, it doesn't bother me. I'm just doing it. I have my special kapata on, that I'm calm. I would like to meet that person. So, real chinuch is a strong relationship. Is a long-term. I think that's a good practical thing to take away also. If you ask yourself, well, if I do this now, is it going to be better or worse for them in long term? The best time for chinuch is when parent and child are in a good mood. You're taking a Shabbos walk, teach about Hashem, inspire and encourage, and be a good role model. And with that, that's the way real chinuch happens. There was a bank ad, I remember as a child. They used to always end the ad with the following words: the right relationship is everything. So, I mean, for banks, I don't know how, I don't think it's such a big deal if you have a great relationship. As long as they don't steal your money, you're all right. But I think it's a great slogan and the real truth for chinuch. Parenting as Rabbeim, the right relationship is everything. I was about to end, but I have to say this story. It's too good to pass up. The Chazon Ish, Gadol Hadar. And if anyone has any questions of the halacha, there might be some questions here, but he knew the halacha, and you should figure out why. But the point I'm making is here is as follows. There was a fellow who was a Machal Shabbos in the 50s or so in Eretz Yisrael. He was off the derech completely. And he asked his father, I guess a rich guy, to buy him a car. Think about that. In the 50s in Eretz Yisrael, it was probably only him and the prime minister that would have had a car. His father said, no problem. One condition, very reasonable, very, very, maybe it's even a chiyuv. He said, just, you can't drive this car on Shabbos. Reasonable, no? I didn't say you could drive other cars. I didn't say you have to go to shul. I didn't say anything. One thing. I'll buy you the car. It was $100,000. No problem. But you can't. And right? And a lot of people make the halacha argument of neiver, misayeya, and all zachar. So of course the kid said absolutely not, and just deteriorated the relationship further. It says when the matter reached the Chazon Ish. It doesn't even say he was asked. When the matter reached the Chazon Ish, he sent a message. It's kedai to buy the car without any conditions. It is kedai to buy the car without any conditions for the long-term relationship. I think that's something we need to keep in mind. Thank you very much. Yeah. We're out. We're out. Let me talk about